Hello and welcome to A Dev Named Josh. I'm a dev named Josh, and last time we talked about variables and functions and data types and creating scripts for our nodes. And now we're going to kind of show the pitfall of this dynamically typed GDScript, okay, and how we can fix it. So GDScript is dynamically typed. What do I mean by that? So as you can see, we can reassign variables down here. I'll go ahead and say my character name is Josh up here. If I could learn how to use my keyboard today. All right. So we got character name Josh, right? So we want to print the character name, which is fine. If we do this, we will obviously, we will just print Josh to the console again, like we did in the last video. But what if we wanted to make sure that we printed Josh to the console? Well, first and foremost, let's make this make a little bit more sense, right? What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a new function. And I'm just going to go ahead and type its name here. Display character name. And then we're going to call it. Now, we're going to get an error because display character name is, we haven't made that function yet, right? But we can go ahead and make it. If we come a couple of lines down, I like to separate my functions by 2 lines. We can declare this new function. Func, same as the ready function. And then I'm just gonna type display character name. Okay. And we're going to declare it with the parentheses and the colon. And now we're going to print character name. It can only be a string, right? It can only be a word value. I don't want it to be a number or whatever. But let's say somewhere else in the code, you accidentally or, mistakenly say that, character name is equal to my whole number. Oh, that's because I did not spell my function name correctly. Okay. Always make sure they match. Okay. So now we have our function down here, and all it does is print the name, and we're making a mistake here on purpose. And all we want to do is say, okay, I want the character's name, and that should be a string value, right? We would want a string there. We don't want a number. But I'm accidentally setting character name to my whole number here, and so when I press play, and we call ready, and that calls display character name, I'm printing 5. I don't want 5 though. I want a string value, okay? And I want to make sure I protect myself from doing things like this. Well, the reason this is possible, because we're saying it's a string up here, but then we're giving it a number down here. The reason this is possible is because GDScript by default is dynamically typed. You could change the value of any of these variables to any other data type. I could change my floating point value to a vector if I wanted to, or a string. And obviously then the variable name doesn't make sense. You get the point. So how do we stop ourselves from doing this? How do we stop ourselves from making this kind of mistake? All right, the way we do this is, and I'm actually gonna change it from my whole number and just set a value because it won't work this way, and I'll explain why in a second. What I wanna do is I wanna set character name to only ever be able to be a string. And the way we do that is we can say colon string with a capital S. And immediately you're going to notice that here, when we're attempting to assign character name to a integer, we are getting an error. Cannot assign a value of type int to a target of type string. Awesome. We have protected ourselves. We now know before we ever run the game or before we ever build the game and try to ship it off to itch.io or whatever, that we've made a mistake. Now, we didn't get that before we added this because the variables are dynamic and you can assign whatever value you want to it. So this helps. Now, what I was saying earlier, if I were to do this, instead of assigning it to a integer value, assign it to a variable that's an integer value, we're still not going to get an error. And the reason for that is this variable is not statically typed like the one above it. This is a dynamic value. So this can be any value we give it. Technically, we could wrap the 5 in a string, and now it's a string value, right? And then this would be valid, but as it stands, 5 by itself without being a string value is not a string. But there's no way for the engine to know that my whole number variable is going to be a number by the time it reaches here, right? It could transform at some point and actually be a string because this is a dynamic variable. So we can tell it that no, this isn't dynamic. This is an int, an integer, a whole number. And now we get our error message back, and now we're protecting ourselves. Oh, I've made a mistake here. Awesome. So it's important that we don't just do some variables, but we type them all. So I'm also going to type the floating point value to a float. And I'll recreate with Control-Shift-D, you can duplicate a line in the editor. And I'm going to create my vector again. And then I'm going to give it vector 2, and then pass it 1, 2 for x and the y values. And we're getting an error because I have it typed as float. We're going to say, no, you're a vector 2. And now everything's good. And now you can see the data types that you're actually assigning this variable to, which is extremely, extremely helpful because now you're getting all this like awesome syntax stuff, and I can't assign a string to a vector. Like, it's great. We're protecting ourselves from ourselves. Now, there is a shorthand for what we're doing up here. Whenever you are assigning the value directly after declaring the variable like this, you can actually get rid of the name of the type. And using this colon equals, we are now saying explicitly, or I'm sorry, not explicitly, we are implicitly saying, hey, whatever value type we're assigning to, like that's the value type of this variable. And as you can see, we're still getting our errors, our error handling. We cannot assign a value of type vector2 to target type of string. Like, this works. Now, I will say this. This is going to come down to preference. You can either do it like this, or you can do it like this, where you explicitly tell it the type that the variable should be before assigning it. I prefer to do things this way, where we are saying it is explicitly a string, and then we assign the value. It's a little bit longer, I realize that, and not everybody's going to be cool with that. You're going to want to, condense as much as you want to. I do it this way because, first of all, it's consistent. If I don't want a value, if I don't want to assign the variable a value, my null, then like we don't know what type this is. This is still dynamically typed. Now, it's still dynamically typed because we haven't assigned it any value. It could be anything, right? So you have to, if you want to tell it what kind it should be, you have to tell it that it's going to be an int or it's going to be a string. You have to say that. Otherwise, like, we're not going to know. So I prefer to do it this way. You can use a shorthand if you want to in cases where it's applicable, but I'm going to do it this way. Additionally, we can type our functions, okay? What if instead of doing the print here, we wanted to get my character name, right? And then we wanted to print, let's say we wanted to give whatever the character name is we get back from display character name. We want to set it, so this is going to be, it's a local character name, right? Because this is a local variable that we're going to get from this. You're going to notice, if you've ever programmed before, that there's a problem here. This isn't doing anything to give us back anything. Simply putting the value here doesn't do anything. We're just referencing character name, which is Josh, right? But it's not going to give us anything back. But GDScript by itself without typing, without static typing, is going to be okay with that. So if we run this, rerun it, well, I mean, it works because of the way that I messed up right here. So we're going to say local character name, and it's going to be what we print to the screen instead of character name. So now we're, just to reiterate, we're going to say, hey, call the display character name function. And whatever display character name function gives us, we're going to store inside of this local character name variable. Again, we're not typing it, so we have a problem already. But then we're going to print the local character name value in the print function, right? We get null. And the reason we get null is because this doesn't return anything. If we want to get character name out of this function, we have to use the return keyword. And now what's going to happen is exactly what we expect. We come in, we call the display character function, or display character name function. It immediately just grabs the character name and returns it. And then we set it to local character name, and then local character name is being printed. Okay, that's why we're doing all that. So, but here's the thing. Despite that, like if I don't return it, like there's no way to know. We're not getting any errors. And we should, because my character name should have a type. The display character name function should have a type that it returns. And like we don't have any of that right now. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna type this, and string is capitalized. And now we still have a problem. Well, I've typed my variable, but I'm not getting a string out of it. We know it's going to be null because we're not using the return keyword. Why is it allowing me to do this? Because the function is still dynamically typed. We can type a function and make it and give it a return value by doing a dash greater than caret. And it's going to make this little arrow. And then we specify what type it should return after it. So in our case, we want to return a string because the local character variable is of type string. So we're going to want whatever value we return out of here to be a string. Now we still have an error. And the reason for that, if we look down here, not all code paths return a value. We're not returning anything. We're just referencing the character name here. So when we add the return keyword, now we are returning character name, which is of type string. And now this understands, oh, I'm a string, you're a string, so I'm going to give you my value, and then we can print it. And then it will print Josh. Same as it did before, but now we're not worried about accidentally messing up anywhere along the way. So I'm hoping this has helped you understand why statically typed GDScript is important and powerful. It's because it protects us from ourselves by making sure that if we make mistakes, we know about them before we ever hit play. And it helps us to not have a lot of bugs show up that we have no idea where they are or what they're doing or how it's happening. This is a better way to use GDScript, in my opinion. Now, there are people who can make GDScript and its like standard dynamic structure sing, and all the power to those people. That is amazing. That's awesome. You do not have to use typing to use GDScript, but this is a safer way to use GDScript. It will protect you from yourself, and it will be better when you're doing larger projects, right? For just this, like we could get away with not typing any of these variables or functions. And real quick, in case you were curious, ready doesn't return anything. So it returns void. It doesn't return anything, okay? And that's how you would declare a void that doesn't actually give us a value back. So that is statically typed GDScript. I hope you see the benefits, and in the next video, we are actually going to go ahead and start using this script for what it's supposed to do and actually move our character around. Thanks for watching. This has been a dev named Josh. I'll see you next time.